And I'd love to just do a little bit of an introduction to let you know a little bit more about Kathleen. So, as I mentioned, she's a research and insight leader with 15 plus years of experience in digital product development. She enjoys building research capacity from scratch and has led teams of researchers, designers, and product managers on their journey towards working insight informed. She's originally from the Netherlands, but she's lived in South Korea, Australia, Sweden, and currently is in France. She is a known advocate for research democratization and uses this as one of the many tools for creating an insight culture. She also founded a new peer-to-peer coaching initiative for research leaders called Grow and Connect, and I'm sure she wasn't planning on it, I'm sure we can ask her about that a little bit more at the end as well. But with no further ado, I'd love to turn it over to Kathleen.
Thank you so much. All right. So thank you so much for the intro. That was really wonderful. And I'm really also big thanks for inviting me here and being part of this. I'm really happy to see there's both designers and researchers and other people, strategists and so on here, because I think this is a topic that does not only concern researchers, it's also, of course, very relevant for designers, because like we said, what are myths that should be busted? Like everyone can do design or no one can do design, like it's only for designers. We have the same kind of going on in research, right? And I have this really dreamy title, hopes, dreams, fallacies, but, it's a myth busting session. We have to say, what it can't do to be able to really appreciate this tool for what it has for us. Now, I have been silent about research democratization for a while, and there's a particular reason for it. I've been playing around with it as one of the many tools I have for around 10 years or so, always loved it and always advocated for it. And at some point, the debate, I think around a year or two ago, it just became so heated, so black and white, and so toxic that I thought, let me just step back. Everyone who wants to rip into me because I think it's good or, vice versa, there's a different situation, a different place for this tool, depending on what works for you and who you are. And the whole debate that we have on LinkedIn and other social media about it's terrible and it's great. No, it's responsible for lives. It's not helpful at all. So I just kind of backed out from it. But now I'm thinking no. I think, it still has a place and we should be talking about it, but just kind of in a kind and open way. It's not black and white. I want to explore the gray parts because it's not, if you ask researchers, they're not pro or totally against. Most people are kind of in the middle. It's it depends. It's our favorite catchphrase, isn't it? It depends. So the gray part, I want to share with you a little framework that can help you decide whether, what democratization can do for you, and some anecdotes from the field and my own case study. And I hope it will help you feel more informed and kind of know what is possible for me. Now, the hopes and dreams. What people often say when they talk about research democratization is that it will actually, free up capacity. If other people are doing research, then the researchers have more time, it will just increase capacity. And by increasing capacity for all the research that needs to be done, you will have, and this is always a very glorious moment, you will have time to do more strategic work. And everyone who's stuck doing usability testing all the time, if they hear this, they're like, oh, really? Yes, that sounds really wonderful, doesn't it? But most of all, it can help you build better products. The more people are involved in talking to end users, and every designer, and I think every researcher would agree on this, the more people are involved in talking with end users and our audiences, the better informed their choices are. And that's what we do all day, every day. We make choices that have an impact on the user experience. Now, the myth debunking things, I have to scratch the first two instantly. And I think, in the long run, it is true. And I sold it to my own teams this way. When I was leading a research team, I was like, we're always understaffed. We have to make sure that our teams start doing their own research, and it will free us time for us to do a more strategic work together. And it did. Just took 2 years. That's 2 long years grinding and teaching and showing and getting all the processes and ops in place to be able to do this. So it's not something like magic bullet, Q1, Q2 will focus on democratization, and then by Q3 and 4 we'll be doing heaps of strategic work that will inform the roadmap for next year. It doesn't work that way. So just scratch those two. If anyone promises you that democratization will help you do these things, you just tell them off and say, no, it'll take forever. It's not working. But then what does it do? What can we actually achieve with it? I want to introduce this framework to you and kind of figure out first, where do you stand in this matrix? Are you in a company organization that has very low research maturity or very high research maturity? So that's on the horizontal axis. If it's high maturity, people understand the value, they involve you early on, you can do strategic work. Low maturity, no one understands anything, just happy you're there, maybe. And then research presence, or people who work with insights, research and insights presence. You can't take it too literal, because sometimes you have 3 researchers on, a company of maybe 40 people, and that's excellent, very high presence. You can also be 3 researchers in a company of 1,000 people. It's like, yeah, that's kind of on the lower end scale. But try to map where you are as a designer, as a researcher. What do you think? Where would you be? And if you're the first hire or a team of 1, you're often in this quadrant, right? Low maturity, low presence. But sometimes you have many researchers on staff, but they're all embedded in product teams, and they often then work in silos. And that makes it really hard to do collaborative work that's more strategic in nature. So quite often you then find, it's not a rule that this is the case, but quite often you find that when researchers are embedded in product teams, that they kind of end up here. There's enough of them to cover all the different teams, but the research maturity itself still has some way to go. Now, some of you might be here. It's very lucky. Not many people end up here. This is the holy grail of research, the places to be. I think this is what we all strive for, to be in a place where you're not alone. You have a team around you, people to work with, to do really impactful work with that, has an impact strategically on the business and so on. Now, what can the tool of research democratization, and I'm saying it's a tool, it has many different flavors, like it can be, everyone is trained to do research and very, like full on. It can also be inviting people along to your sessions and making it like really light touch points. There's different degrees of it. But what can happen if you're in this place, the Holy Grail, and you work with research democratization? I think the effect it has then at that point is that, it's not needed for anything particularly, but it can help nurture empathy. It can really help nurture empathy of your stakeholders if they are in touch with their audience on a regular basis. So getting reports or seeing outcomes or outputs of research and seeing it back in the product and the impact it has is one thing, but actually being involved in it and feeling it firsthand and talking to your end users is, of course, a very different thing. It takes longer and helps you maintain that position that you're in. So nurturing empathy is great. At the same time, if you're in a good spot where you want to be, you don't have to use this tool. There's other things you could be doing with your time and resources. But what about being here? Imagine you are embedded in product teams. What can research democratization do for you at that point? Well, it could help you push the research maturity that direction. And I want to share an example from something I did. About 5 years ago, I was working for a media company in Scandinavia. And I had quite a large team. We were 10 people, 10 researchers. And we're working with all these different newspapers, both in Norway and Sweden. And people would reach out to us when they needed research to be done. great collaborations. But with this particular newspaper in Bergen, we found that they knew where we were and what we could do, but they would often reach out to us quite late. So we would always be involved towards the end. And any designer and researcher knows you don't want to be at the end. You want to be at the beginning, because that's where you can have most impact, right? So what we did, I talked with the main publisher and said, can we do an experiment here? And it's like, what kind of experiment? So, well, we do something fun. And he was up for anything. He's like, yeah, just do it. If you're coming, just do it. So what we did is that me and 2 other researchers, we flew in, we came for 1 week. And during that week, we organized all kinds of different types of researchers that the staff could sign up to participate in. So in 1 week, but I think half of the staff signed up, and this included journalists, this included people who are producing podcasts, it included engineers, but also, the front staff, event management, all kinds of people. And they could be involved in doing usability testing, deep interviews. On Wednesday, we went out into the field to a mall in the neighborhood, and they could be doing card sorting exercises or kind of like usability testing, at that point, guerrilla testing. We had some group discussions that we hosted as well. And at every stage, it was not us doing it, but the people working in this newspaper. They would be conducting the interviews, we'd give them an interview guide and so on, and give them, make sure there were participants there to talk to, but not much guidance. And of course, this was a mess, right? You can imagine what it was like. At the end of the week, they had spoken to more than 100 people. And this was, from teenagers that were reluctant to read any news and get any kind of news from Facebook, to people that have been, loyal subscribers for the last 50 years, happy to come for coffee and talk about news and how important media was. And I had notes from 50 people in different handwriting and styles and whatnot. So we looked back at this and we're like, yeah, was this really a success? Because what people did not learn how to do proper research, obviously. We gained some insights from all these 40 different kinds of notes and handwriting. But I think the main thing that happened, and something we realized throughout the week and more so later, is that it created a buzz. Everyone was talking about research, about talking to people outside of the building, being out there. And it really helped people kind of have new kinds of discussions. And it helped people realize that, hey, we can have brainstorming sessions in-house, but what we should be doing at the start of a project is making sure we get insights from our audience and the people we're trying to make these services for. So that was a really wonderful experience. The buzz was there throughout the week. But what we noticed afterwards is that they really knew where to find us. And not just, the people working in product and tech, also the people in marketing knew where to find us. So it was a success in terms of pushing the maturity up. I don't think I would ever do it again, though. I'm not sure. It was good fun. But trying to get insights from it, not so much. So enhancing understanding, that's one thing they can do. But what happens if you have really high maturity, but you have a low presence? You want more headcount. And this is quite often, if you've been in a place for a while, it's quite often what we want, right? More headcount to do more meaningful work. I think the tool of research democratization can help you advocate to expand your team. And that will push you right up, that kind of expansion. I think when you are working with others and sharing your practice with the designers, with the product managers, with the engineers, they all understand your craft. They understand how important it is. They understand the impact it has. They also understand that when it comes to, budget for next year, it's budget season right now, obviously, they have to debate with each other. Limited amount of resources. What do we vouch for? Do we need 2 more engineers, or do we need 1 researcher and 1 engineer? And of course, if you are the sole researcher, you're always, a minority. If you are vouching for more staff, yeah, you're just a lonely voice. But if these others are also vouching for you and with you, you have a bigger chance to be able to expand. Other than that, of course, we do know that, when you are, this is also an experience from someone I know, like if you are the sole designer or researcher on a team, and you can really share your practice when people do this firsthand, taking notes, doing interviews, making action plans, getting insights. They are so much more involved and more dedicated to implementing those findings, can have a massive amount of impact. So in that sense, yeah, it really helps with making a better product, obviously. Now, the last one, and this is where I think it gets a bit iffy. Because this is quite often where people are when others suggest you should be doing research democratization. As a team of one or kind of new in organization, you should be doing research democratization because it would help you scale research. You'll be able to do more with less resources. And I think, yes, in the long run, that's true, but it takes a long time. And the path is still not linear up to where you want to be. It kind of goes back and forth, right? So I am not sure it's worth your time. And I also think, regardless of whether you should be doing it or not, is a really tough spot to be in. If you're in a place that doesn't know how to value your skill set, that's not keen to invest in making sure there's more of you who can do the work that needs to be done, always feeling understaffed, not being valued, it's not a great place to be in. And to then be told that you should be sharing your practice and basically spending all your time teaching others to do what you love doing, that sometimes kind of sets the wrong tone for a lot of people. And that's why I also understand that there is this hesitation, reluctance, and a bit of a bad reputation for this. If you're made to do it, that's never a great place to be in. So yeah, I think this is also an anecdote from someone I've worked with. Their CPO said, we need to empower everyone to make good decisions, and no one can say anything against this, right? Everyone agrees, but it can be just too much. You have to make choices about your limited amount of time. How much can you do? Maybe this is just too much. Now, I hope everyone's had a look at this, thought of where they were, thought of the potential, see where they might be able to go. If you now think like, yeah, I think I should be giving it a try, why not? Let's do something. Things to watch out for are that research does tend to happen more in silos when there's not one central person overseeing it. So if you democratize research and really empower teams to do their own research, it often stays there. It's very rare for it to come back unless it's someone actively gathering those insights and making sure there's cross-pollination between teams, between insights, and some kind of coordination. But then if you take on that coordinator role, it's very easy to end up in admin overload. It's happened to me as well. I've been trying to convince designers to do a lot of research, and they would always be like, sure, I'll do it, but you have to make sure that you do recruitment, you have to do compensation. Can you please get me a good manuscript? And X, Y, Z. Before you know it, it blows up, and it can be a full-time role, which some people really enjoy and others don't. And I think that's, related to the other pitfall to really watch out for. It can either hinder or help your professional development. I've worked with a junior researcher, and at that point, she was made to support a couple of product teams to do mainly a lot of usability testing. And she felt stuck because she could see that it would take another year of holding their hands and helping them figure this out before she could get to the more juicy, meaty stuff that she wanted to be doing and want to learn more about. So in the end, she resigned. I tried to convince her, like, no, stick with it. Like, I was a bad manager. It's like, no, it will happen. Strategic research will come your way. It's like, no, never happened. Or it did happen, but it took too long for her. And of course she was gone. Rightfully so, right? I don't blame her at all. But I've also worked with more senior people who had done a lot of work, done a lot of research, all kinds of methods and things on, and they were really keen to really try and teach others. So they were setting up all these teaching, training modules and a whole program for this. And they loved it because they could really tap into learning new skills. So again, it depends, yes. But professional development is something to look out for. It's not only the development and goals of the company that are key. Your professional development is also very important and has to fit. Otherwise, it can just be a terrible thing to do. So when to say no? If you feel it hinders your professional development, I do think that's a valid reason to say no. If you think that it will take too long to see the benefits and it doesn't outweigh what is needed right now for the company in terms of strategic work or other work that needs to be done now, also definitely a valid reason to say no. If you are being made to do it and you don't want to, also a reason to say no, right? And I do think I must admit, like, when I was years ago, when I was a big proponent of this, people would come to me and say, but if I include others in my practice, I will be made redundant. And I always thought, that's ridiculous. The more I share my practice, the more people see how hard it is and how good I am. Why would anyone make you redundant? But now I also realize, I was working in Scandinavia at that time. Job security is so high. Once you're in a company for 6 months, you have a permanent contract. You need to be stealing from the company before they can do anything like booting you out. That's a very different situation to be in, like when you are based in the US, for example. So if you're in a place of high job security, and also, for example, in Scandinavia, lifelong learning and investing in training and so on, education is free. It's very normal to share your practice. But if you've paid, I don't know how many thousands of dollars for your degree, of course you're more hesitant to get other people on board and doing it with you, because that can be a threat. So yes, a reason to say no, for sure, I understand. But then how to say no in a respectful way without being the one who's dragging their feet? I can highly recommend Lisa Reichelt's work. She's done this beautiful series of 5 long articles about the dysfunctions of democratized research. You can really find some really good information there. I appreciate her so much. She's so knowledgeable. I stand behind everything she's saying there. It's really, really good stuff. I feel and think differently, but I do think if you want to say no, this is where you can get an expert opinion that will support you, find the right arguments. If you have to convince a designer, head of design, go for Jared Spool, because he's the dinosaur in our field that he has written about this as well and has some valid points to make in a very funny way also. I appreciate him very much so. And I think, what he's saying about, it sounds a bit arrogant, getting other people to do what I do. Totally agree with him. So valid arguments there. Now, I have to make sure we have time for questions. So our exploration is about to end. But what did we discover in the gray? Which myths are debunked here? Well, like I said before, time-saving measures and increasing, the scale of your research practice, it doesn't happen overnight. So just scratch those. But what you can find is ways to push research maturity, that the company and everyone, all the stakeholders in it, start to really understand your value and the timing of including you and what you add to the product and the quality of it. It also can help, increase presence, like get more people to vouch for hiring more researchers. even though this is probably not the time that it happens so much. This will, swings and roundabouts. There will be an upswing again in terms of hiring. So then, it's the time to do it. I also think it can be really creative and inspiring. For me, it's something to play around with. There's not one set way to do it. You can experiment. So the thing I did in Bergen, we was kind of having this like shock therapy almost, like everyone gets a go. Let's try it out. That's possible. There's so many different ways to do this. So you can play around with it and hopefully get the freedom to do so as well. Now, last but not least, this is where I want to end. I'm starting to hate the word democratization, first of all, because it's just a tongue twister. It does my head in. But also because it does have the negative connotation by now. So I want to propose that we call it research coaching. We all need coaching one way or another. And that's basically what you're doing, right? You're not letting other people take over. You're trying to guide them to see, what is possible. They will never be able to do what you have done, but you will be able to guide them and let them, flow through the water on a boat, whatever direction they need to be going. So that's what I want to leave you with for now before we get into questions. I want to say thank you. I'm not going to say anything about Grow and Connect now, but if you are a research leader and you want to have meaningful discussions with your peers where we just dig into all our problems and don't share highlights or big successes, reach out to me. I would love to talk.
Yeah, we do have some questions coming in. So the first one we have is, have you run into issues where product management wants to own research, i.e. when they want to do continuous discovery, in quotes?
I always think like, do I thank Teresa Torres or do I hate her? I'm not sure just yet, because it can go either way, right? It can either be that, product managers really embrace it and really, really think deeply about how can I include research in my practice, or it can go this way, like where they just want to take ownership of it and, talk to one person a week and think they're doing research, because they're not. There's a distinction between doing user research and getting feedback. And those client conversations that Teresa, proposes, that's just getting feedback. So now I have to go back to the question again.
About product manager, like kind of the push and pull between product management wanting to do research versus like the research team, let's say.
So I think like you have to embrace it, because anyone who wants to be involved should be involved, right? Like why push them away? Why push them to the side? You need their buy-in for anything. At the same time, you need to guide them and coach them on how to do this well, and really make sure that they understand that they need you. Like they need your practice, your skills, your, the way to bring rigor and quality to the practice. Because if you follow the book and the tree and the whatnot, I don't see that going well. I haven't seen it going well for anyone just yet.
Yeah. Okay. We also have a question here. So what kind of advice would you give to a UX designer team of one without researchers, but with developers and a PM? Would it be worth applying this framework? So maybe kind of two questions, like what advice would you have in general? And if it is part of the framework, cool. If not, what other advice might you have for them?
Yeah, I think if the team of one, like, and even as a designer, I think like, what is the maturity in the company, right? Do you feel there's a mature approach to design and applying its value already? Like, do you need to, like, where it depends where you are. Do you need to get more resources to work with you, or do you need to push maturity? I think in both cases, it can help to involve your PM and your engineers or developers in your practice, definitely. And it will help them, like become more aware of how to apply, like what it takes to make sure there's good design in the product and that you have insights that go into the product. So like it fits in the framework, whether you're a designer or a researcher, like it applies to both. involving people in your practice definitely is helpful. At the same time, it comes at a cost, right? If you have to involve them, it takes some of your time. And if you already feel up to here and getting stuff done, it's like finding that balance. It's a tough one. It's a tough situation to be in, definitely.
Yeah, I'm wondering, have you seen or experienced or talked to other people where like what has worked with like trying to communicate the value of research and getting more resources for it?
Yeah, I think it's really worked to help to include people in the research practice, to letting them, take notes in interviews or to even do some of the interviews. Of course, quality goes down, but getting them that first-hand experience in terms of talking to their end users and being able to ask their own questions there as well, I think really helps with getting buy-in. Also, including them in the analysis part makes your analysis take longer, and you need to really convince people to be part of it. But then you really do see that, they take more ownership of the findings. And I've had this team of developers that were like, I was running this product and it was a fashion website with fashion tips for Swedish women. And this was a bunch of really young developers based in Poland did not care about fashion, online shopping, or Swedish women, like no connection at all. But getting them kind of to watch videos where people were navigating our website and so on, and helping them, like see what the behavior is and the way of thinking is of these women, really help them think about clever new solutions and really kind of, like think differently about how we're making this product. And all of a sudden, instead of just going with, I've done this Jira ticket properly, don't, you bother me. They're like, I've seen this Jira ticket, but what I think we're trying to do is something different. And if we want to achieve this, then we should be rewriting it this and this way. So they became really engaged.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think like getting engagement and like a sense of team around, uniting each other around research or the end user's behavior, I think is always gold. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, it sounds like you're also talking a lot about like empathy within like the team itself for the team itself, not just empathy for the user, but empathy for each other and what we're doing. And so understanding there comes as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's so true. Wow.
We have a question here about insights. Do you have any tips for getting teams to agree on what constitutes a good insight?
I think there's history behind this question that I might need to understand. I'm guessing here that, that's quite often the case, especially when it comes to qualitative research, that people start doubting it if the insight comes from discussions with 10 or 15 people rather than the sample of 1 million that we are, doing stuff with, reaching out to every day. Yeah, it's a tough one, right? I do think like quite often when it comes to understanding why things are happening, we need qualitative research for that, right? Like we have so much data that we're looking at all the time and it tells us what is happening. But understanding the why, for that we really need to be talking to our end users to understand them better. Otherwise, we're just guessing, right? So what constitutes a good insight is anything that helps us understand the why behind the what. Some people are stubborn forever. I pick my battles. I have given up on people when like, yeah, you're never going to get this. But I do find that in situations where sometimes you're in situations where there is no hard data, no numbers. And that's where you can really win over those who are skeptical. And that's always my glory moment. I remember the time when GDPR was being introduced and everyone was just like trying to implement stuff, but nobody knew what was going to happen. All of a sudden, the CEO who had never acknowledged me or seen me before ever, because it's a big company, I was like, okay, Kathleen, you talk to 10 people. what did they say? So all of a sudden, you get distraction around qualitative work because there is no data to rely on. Not that I want those things to happen very often. GDPR was terrible, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of it's sounding a bit of like getting people to even understand like the importance of insights and the use of them in a way. And that's even maybe just a beginning of the conversation that can happen with the team about like defining what a good insight is. Because I think what I'm also hearing from you is like it's also really hard to define what a good insight is because it's not always hit a checklist, let's say.
No.
And
Exactly.
so what might be a good insight in one context might not work as a good insight in another context. And so at least kind of addressing why we use insights could be a good place to start potentially having that conversation with people.
Yeah, I think like when these things are questions, there that is a sign that you are in a company where the maturity around research and insights and design thinking and so on is really low.
Mm-hmm.
So it requires being gentle with each other and explaining the processes and showing how it's done and kind of leading the way. But also, I do think it is helpful to include them because that helps you win them over when they see and hear things firsthand.
Yeah. We have another question here about this idea of like coaching with the team. So it says, what coaching methods should we offer? Is a learn by doing approach, training sessions, or workshops more effective? And how do we determine the best way to prioritize them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I experimented quite a bit with this, like, the whole crash and burn, push people into a room, let them, like discover it, as well as really providing training and so on. And I think it's a mix, everyone learns differently. So it really depends on who you're working with. Some people respond really well to training in like a controlled environment. Others feel so free, they're like, just let me do it. I learn by doing. But I do think if you provide any kind of training, do it like in small doses. So don't like I will teach you everything I know in a week, because people don't take it in that way. An hour here or there, small modules that you can repeat also over time, and then letting people also then try it out and be okay then with research happening that's not great quality. Like you have to let that go, because they won't be able to do it the way you do it ever. Even after a couple of years, they won't be able to do it because you've done this for a long time, right? So I do think, yeah, you kind of have to let it go. And that is tough because you see things happening and you see insights and conclusion like, can dig a bit deeper. Or, like training people to ask why and to be silent at the right times, of course, is really hard. But it's worth it, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm like what I'm hearing from you also is like almost like doing a bit of research on the people who need to learn in your
Yeah.
team and finding out what kind of ways they might really kind of attach on to the training as well. Because if it's, I know for me personally, like I'm a doer, I don't want to read a book necessarily, I want to
Yeah.
try it out. And so if you tell me to read the book, I might not read the book, but if you're like, try this thing out, you might do it wrong. That works more for me. But there's people, but like not everyone's like that. So kind of understanding the team that you're working with and what they're trying to do and maybe tap into some of what works for them.
Others might just want to observe or take notes or do those kinds of things. And, because they are more hesitant about talking to people. And it also depends on what they've done before. Like I've worked with a designer who was really good at interviewing but before was only doing UI and so on. It's like, where did you learn this? He said, well, I worked in a call center for many years while studying. So talking to people and being showing my empathy, that's like I've done that. I got it. It's like, okay, of course. So it depends a lot on what people have done before, right? And how comfortable they are with this.
Yeah.
How introverted or extroverted they are as well. Oh.
Nice. Okay, so we have another question here. How do we address situations where non-researchers perceive best UX research practices as burdensome, or a rigid process? So they say IGA framing, crafting interview guides before engaging with users, like etc.
Yeah, I've heard it all. It's too slow, too rigorous. Does it really need to take that long? Do we really need to craft personas by asking people? Can we just, make them up? There's a great AI tools now to just think and come up with stuff. Yeah. How do you deal with it? I think like here, there's two ways to deal with it, right? You can educate them and be as thorough and stick to your ways of doing. Or you can also maybe, show them that, yes, you can have speed for some parts of research and you can take time for other parts of research. Like, I do think it pays off. Like you want to be partners. And if there is, a time frame that's very short, work with that time frame, but make sure you highlight the constraints or limits there. Like you can be flexible, but you can't deliver that way all the time. I find I've been in that loop as well, where it's like, okay, but you really want me to do another study every week? That's not possible. I can do it 3 or 4 weeks in a row, but after that, I just need to take a break. Yeah.
Yeah. We have another question here too, kind of around the not quite training, but I'll just read it. So, what are some ways to work with new in-career researchers to think beyond maybe academic approaches and find their own voice in the field?
Okay. Well, for new researchers, I always find that you have to try everything out, right? You need to be given the space and time to try all the different methods and things and try firsthand, what works in which situation. And I see that a lot of people that are new are sometimes a bit hesitant of taking that liberty to try and potentially fail.
Mm.
And it's, of course, great to have a great mentor that can help you figure things out. But there's also something quite liberating about maybe being the only person. Like quite often in startups, they don't always have budget to hire senior people. There's a junior there. You have freedom to do whatever. Then it can feel like something that's a bit suffocating and like you don't know where to go, or you just embrace it and really just try it out. And try something different every time. Even though you think like, oh, I know this method will work really well, but maybe this could also be something. It's, yeah, I think in the end with research, like, especially when you liberate yourself from the academic restraints that you've often trained in, you can have so much fun. And that's so nice. Because you have to realize, like in academia, there will be a professor or someone else who will have that lens of, is this rigorous enough or is this good enough? But in your company, even if you are junior, you have most expertise still in the craft and in the practice, even though you haven't done it for so long. So no one will have that lens or that knowledge to examine your approach with. So you are free, right? No one is going to do a study of how you've done X, Y, Z, and so on. So it's quite, once you kind of embrace that, I think you can have a really good time.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, just kind of freeing yourself up and the not being afraid to fail too.
Yeah,
Nice.
and like nothing ever goes perfect. Even if you have the perfect setup, people don't show up, or like stuff happens. That's life. But you will learn by doing, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one last question, and we'll finish off. I know that we have also a good mix of like product and UX designers, and I'm just curious, like any like final tips or like ways that you can kind of work with your UX researcher if you have one and support each other in a better way, even if you're not like fully going into the UX democratization world.
Yeah, great one. I think like it always pays off to have a really good relationship, because the more you kind of share what you're working on and what your challenges are, the more chances there are that your researcher will be able to weave that into a study they're already planning. It's like, oh, but I can add that question easily. Or, oh, I think I still have some work on that from before. Or, oh, I can ask around. Like, they're so well connected, and it's so easy for them to kind of weave things into what they're already planning and doing. So the tighter your relationship, the more insights you will be able to get on the fly for free. Just I guess is. So it's worth investing in, taking care of your researchers. Buy them a coffee every now and then,
I was
catch
just
up.
gonna say, maybe just the best advice is grab a coffee together, buy them a coffee.
Exactly. Grab a coffee, talk about your challenges, kind of share that. Let them also share their challenges, because you might be able to help them and make it a mutual collaboration. Oh, definitely.
Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights with us today. And it was a real pleasure talking to you. The one question in here that I skipped purposely was like, will you share the slides? And we will be sharing the slides later on. So I know Jeff kind of mentioned that in the chat. So if you didn't catch anything, we'll also have this on YouTube in a little while as well. But thank you again so much. We really loved having you here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna wrap up with a couple more slides and we'll end off for today. So next month, November 15th is our November meetup. We have Kevin Hawkins with us, who's the head of design and research at Amentus, and he is going to talk about how to get some buy-in from our stakeholders and maybe make them listen a little bit. So if this is a subject you're interested in, you can sign up on that date on the website already. We also have upcoming in 2 weeks our facilitating workshops course. So this is 10 workshops over 22 days. It's over October 30th to November 20th. This is something you're interested in. We have just a couple essential seats and a couple premium seats left. So feel free to kind of check that out on our website as well. If you want to stay connected with the Guild more and enjoy continuing these conversations, you can apply to the Guild of Working Designers either with this link, or you can go to bit.ly/Guild of Working Designers. And we'd love to see you there and continue these conversations. Other than that, we are at the Fountain Institute, and our vision is a world that seeks designers, and we'll put researchers in there too, for the way that they think and not just what we use. Thank you guys again so much. It was a real pleasure, and we'll see you